Hey everyone. GLC, Kanye's longtime collaborator, a friend since high school. We actually get the story of the GLC Kanye friendship origin story on this podcast. He went on to Van Lathan's The Red Pill podcast. And these guys talked for 2 hours. And Kanye came up intermittently throughout. And your boy here went through all of it, listening on iTunes at 2 times speed, and took timestamp notes about every time that Kanye came up. So this video could be a little bit boring because I'm going to be going through all the timestamps and what was brought up at that point. Maybe I should pick one or two a deep dive, but I figure if you want to listen to the podcast, then this is an easy way to actually, it's worthwhile hearing GLC talk and tell these stories. I could try to convey the information or give an interpretation of the information, but I don't think that's going to be as good of an experience as actually listening to GLC. So if you can bring up the podcast while you listen to this, I can run you through the timestamps, what's talked about, or you can listen to this first and then kind of find the places that you want to find and the points that you want to listen to. So we're going to go through. I'm going to give you all of those. I got a whole list on this notebook, and give you the topics. And of course, I'll get into some of it myself, thoughts on it, but for the most part, this is going to be a run through. So it's not until 16 minutes in that Van really asks GLC about Kanye, and they get into talks about prison reform and the work that, I guess, the consequences of Kanye talking with Trump and Kim and Kanye's work with Trump's administration to try to pass the prison reform bill. And GLC says he's seen people get out of jail because of this bill and come home, and he's been able to talk with them, work with them, that this is making a real difference, along with Kanye and Kim getting specific individuals like Alice Johnson, who was just on the State of the Union as one of Trump's guests tonight, which was wild to see. 17 minutes, GLC talks about the Regal Theater in Chicago, which is at 79th Street. It's Chicago's version of the Apollo Theater, and it's been desolate for years. And when Kanye was in Chicago, GLC brought Kanye and Kim through, and they were like, "This place is amazing. Like, we'll do what we have to do to help you reopen it." So GLC said they put up the money and they're renovating it. They're getting it going again. It's going to be like a 3,000 to 4,000 seats theater and could bring as many as 200 jobs to the community. And he was telling Van. Oh, and Van, you may remember Van Lathan. He's the guy from TMZ who was the one that confronted Kanye after Kanye said, "Sounds like a choice." He was the one that was just like, "I'm hurt. Like, how could you say that?" And that Kanye then went up to try and hug. You can see that Van, still has love for who he wants Kanye to be, but is still opposed to who he thinks Kanye's become, despite GLC being like, "Nah, his intentions are good. Like, he's a good dude. Like, he can be, on his own energy at times and on his own level, but, he's good." And you have GLC, or you have Van Lathan kind of still being like, "Is he? Is he?" So there's still a bit of tension there, but Van seemed to come around. In his intro about the show, he said that he thinks if people hear this show, they're going to have a change of opinion towards, positive about Kanye, just based on what GLC is saying, getting some more of the context. It's hard to be as, insanely mad at Kanye after you hear all of the details and stories and everything that GLC is providing. So then it's not until 19 minutes that they start talking about the MAGA hat, which is one of the preview topics that was in yesterday's episode. And just wanted to give a shout out to Yeepak Shakur for letting me know that this interview was taking place. He had tweeted us about it and was just like, "Yo, peep this." So thank you for that. Otherwise, I would never have caught this. So they talk about the MAGA hat, and Van's asking, what do you do about the hat? What's going on with the hat? And GLC just says, he gave me all of the hats. He gave me a box of the hats, and when we talked about it, he said he wasn't going to put it on anymore. Van's kind of like, when was that, And GLC says a couple weeks back. So if this was recorded, recently, like end of January, February. This would have been at the start of 2019. So I think that lines up kind of with Kanye's last mention of Trump, and we haven't heard anything since. I mean, who knows? He may come out tomorrow after the State of the Union and just be like, Trump continues to kill it, like, make America great, and people are like, ah. But we'll see. But it seemed to be GLC's perception that Kanye had kind of moved past that, and that wasn't going to be what he was on at this point. So we'll see. And then 22 minutes, we get Never Wearing the Hat again. And this is when GLC talks about Ye's point of view on the hat, saying specifically that when Kanye put the hat on, he viewed it as like, hey, we got a lot of people, like, we got some good things done. Like, I can put on this hat and make things happen. And if making things happen comes at the cost of a lot of public vitriol, that's fine. Like, I can handle that smoke. I can be the Dark Knight in this case because that's what we need. It may not be what we want from Kanye, but that's what we need from him. Just to use Batman references. But that seemed to be the kind of point that GLC gets at. It's like, you may hate the hat, you may question why he put the hat on, but when you talk to Kanye about it, he viewed the hat as a means to an end. And with those things accomplished, we'll see what happens. But then they teased Larry Hoover as a talking point, and Larry Hoover is a huge legend in the Chicago, I guess, street game's not the right word, like the Chicago streets. GLC goes into a bit of the backstory that, you know, Larry, like a lot of young men in Chicago, came up in the game, was selling drugs, like into violence. He killed somebody and went to jail at 21. And at that point in his life was still on this negative track. And he ended up with like a lot of years in prison, like lifetimes in prison, despite changing who he is at this point and having this reform of the soul. And he's become a bit of a folk hero in the Chicago area and just to people outside Chicago as well. Just a lot of, not just youths, but like a lot of people in the Black community really look up to Larry Hoover and want Hoover out of jail. And Kanye had talked about Larry Hoover a decent amount in 2018. He talked about going to dinner with Larry Hoover's wife, or at least seeing her at dinner. He talked to Trump about Hoover, and one of the talking points is that Larry Hoover, who hasn't been able to do anything for decades, has had more prison time than the Unabomber, or got a longer sentence than the Unabomber. Like, how insane is that? How unfair is that? And there's been no chance for a second chance, despite all of Larry Hoover's crimes being at that early stage in his life. It seems kind of unfair. But one of the things that's teased is that ever since Kanye put the hat on, since Kanye went and talked to Trump about Larry Hoover's lawyers have been in constant talks with people from the administration about, oh God, what's it called? When, it starts with a P, doesn't it? Blanking on it. A pardon. Oh, thank goodness. That Larry Hoover could get a pardon. So that's been in the works because of Kanye putting on the hat, because of Kanye giving Trump a hug, going to the White House, having this conversation. So that comes up, and then there's a bit of a break. It's not until 36 minutes that we get more of Kanye. And from this point, it's GLC talking about how he met Kanye and kind of his history with Kanye, what they had in common back then, what their interests were, how they were kind of grinding it out, trying to make something of themselves, the group that they had, and the kind of people that were trying to help them get put on, and how that group, like, they had songs playing on the radio, like, they had John Monopoly backing them, like, managing them. It seemed like they could make something happen, and then nothing happened, which was when GLC talks about, like, you know, he had to go get a job at the mall. Kanye had to go get a job at the mall. Like, and here they just thought they were going to have this huge break. Like, they were going to be the next thing, and then nothing, which maybe you catch a little bit of that on Last Call when Kanye's like, things weren't popping off like they were supposed to. I think this was what he was referring to. And then he talks about how Ye could ball. Like that back then, he doesn't know if it's still the same now, but Ye was like a great basketball player. And mostly because of Kanye's big head, he could head fake really well. Um, at 39 minutes, he talks about when he first heard about Kanye. It was in the lunchroom, and some kid came in with like a really fucked up haircut. And GLC, who was always kind of like rapping in the lunchroom, this is when he first got to high school. He was 15. Uh, Kind of like entertaining everybody. It was just like, what the fuck happened to your hair? And the kid's like, oh, my man Kanye did it. And he's like, what's a Kanye? Kid's like, oh, he's this awesome dude and he makes beats. Like, he's a producer. And at that point, GLC's like, oh, the haircut's not that bad. Like, can I get an intro? And he and Kanye started talking and hanging out, and the rest is history. So 40, he talks about Ye at 15. Or Ye at 15, and even then when he's hearing what Ye was doing with samples and like GLC back then being like a music head and being really into music and having an appreciation for it beyond just the superficial, I like the radio, he could tell what Kanye was doing even then was special and that Kanye had this ability. 43 minutes in, Ye always rapped, but he made beats so he didn't have to pay anyone because they didn't have money to pay anyone. So GLC talks a bit about that. 47 minutes, he talks about Ye's dedication, the fact that like GLC would be going out and they'd bring girls back to the crib, and Kanye would just be working on the thing that he was working on hours before. Like GLC would be gone for a few days and come back, and Kanye's wearing the same exact clothes. That dude was just locked in and focused, and while the rest of them were kind of trying to have that work-life balance, not the same for Ye. He was just on his grind. Like, that 5 beats a day for 3 summers wasn't a lie. Like, dude was on it. And he always wanted to be a rapper. Like, that wasn't a thing. Like, it wasn't that later in the game he tried rapping. He had been doing it the whole time. And then they talk about Ye in New York City and that they looked at it as kind of a partnership. Like, GLC was still doing a ton of work, sending like records to Kanye, lyrics to Kanye, and Ye was the plug. He was the guy in New York City who had all these connects, and it wasn't like a GLC and Kanye thing. That's not how I want to phrase that. It wasn't them as individuals, each trying to make their individual thing work. Like, GLC saw it that they were a partnership. And whatever success Kanye was getting, if he was getting to work with somebody, if he was getting a record out, if he was getting a production credit, like, that was for the both of them. That it was that kind of like brotherhood coming up. So there wasn't the kind of jealousy that you might see from other people, which is actually a situation that happened. Ye almost got attacked by somebody that he was supposed to work with, who was an artist that GLC kind of laments when he talks about it. He's like, this dude, I really think could have been something special, but he was upset about how some of the stuff had gone down with Kanye. And when Kanye came back to Chicago to give money to families that had been victims of a fire, this dude tried attacking Kanye, but GLC was there and kind of toned it down. But I guess as GLC tells it, there was enough heat on him after that he kind of had to get out of Chicago for a little while, which he doesn't get into more details about it, but I don't know, it made it seem like there was a a pretty serious thing that went down. He said that he and Ye didn't do anything, but some other people that were there with them, there was some violence that went on. So it's just kind of like, oh, Jesus. So that's at 49 minutes that we get the story of Ye almost being attacked. And then at 54 minutes and 30 seconds, we get GLC talking about when he got to go on tour with Kanye and Quelly. And that Good Music got formed then, and it was Kanye, GLC, John Legend, and Consequence. Those were the original members. At 58 minutes, it talks about, how they made the College Dropout and how they were making music. Like, Kanye was getting to work with all of these artists at this point. Like, his production was this huge deal. And they would tell him to come to the studio. This would be the time that they'd start recording. But because these are all stars in their own right? They're late to everything because they have other obligations, they're doing other things, they're running on their own time. So Kanye would get to the studio on time and be able to start working on his own music because nothing else is going on. The studio space is rented. The other artist isn't there. So he could have had 2 hours to be mixing, mastering, doing whatever he needed to do for his own album. So he made the College Dropout on other people's time, which is kind of awesome. But GLC stresses how Kanye was always the first into the studio and always the last to leave. And it was because he was such a perfectionist, but also because he got to take advantage of getting to work on his own album. And then 60 Minutes, he talks about how Good lost distribution through Sony. So that first iteration of Good music kind of went stagnant. It still existed, but it had no distribution arm, which kind of sucked for all the artists that were on the label. And it wasn't until My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy that Good music kind of got kicking off again. 61 Minutes, he didn't work on Yeezus or Ye. So those are the only two Kanye albums that GLC says he hasn't had some kind of input on. 63 Minutes, he says that he doesn't think running a label is high on Kanye's mind at this moment. Like, he has other things in his mind, and that's why Good music isn't to the level that other Kanye things are. Like the clothing, like the music, that just running a label, he hasn't turned his attention to it yet. So 65, which I think we can all kind of see, right? Like, it's Kanye's label, but it never feels like it's popping off the way that we would imagine Kanye's label should be. Like, it signs artists, but where's the output? Where's Cruel Winter? I wish it was working more. 65 Minutes in, a bit distant from Ye, he said that he oh god, I don't remember this note. I can't remember if it was him talking about how during this time frame there was distance between him and Kanye, and lately they've been in touch again, and that's what it was talking about, this historical distance, or if he was just saying, like, currently there's a bit of a distance, like, but I don't think so, because they've been talking a lot, and Kanye's been referring to GLC a lot, so I guess go to 65 Minutes and see what the hell I'm talking about. And then it's not until an hour and 39 minutes that Kanye comes back in. So what, that's like 30 minutes later? And they talk about Ye's meeting with Trump, and, you know, GLC talks about how everybody was focused on, he wore the hat, he hugged Trump, and GLC says that's not how he would have handled being in a similar situation. But Kanye's Kanye, he's his own man, and that if you look at what Kanye talked about prison reform, he talked about mental health, he talked about education, he talked about bringing jobs back to Chicago, he talked about freeing Larry Hoover, he talked about all these great progressive ideals that everybody can get behind, but nobody wanted to talk about that because they were so focused on the visuals of the situation. And then at an hour and 41 minutes, Van Lathan asks a question that we've discussed even earlier in this. He asks, can Trump be reasoned with? I've said many times, like, there's only so much saying, like, fuck Trump can do. And having a chorus of celebrities saying, like, fuck Trump, great, you're showing that you're unhappy with the administration, but what is that actually getting done? What problem is being solved when it's that kind of antagonism? I'm not saying that we shouldn't be upset. I'm not saying, like, you can't criticize or you have to be everybody's best friend when they're pissing you off or doing something you think is legitimately wrong. But just, if you want things to change, how do you get things to change? And Kanye's method of being a friend rather than a foe and befriending somebody that would otherwise been viewed as an enemy is a very powerful tool. And that's what Van Lathan's talking about. Like, is that actually possible? Or is what Kanye's doing, like, a noble but fruitless venture that just makes him look bad? And GLC's response to that is kind of what you'd expect. Like, you got to look at what's been done. Like, he doesn't know if Trump can be reasoned with, but this is where he brings up Larry Hoover's lawyers. Like, ever since that meeting with Kanye, Larry Hoover's lawyers have been in touch with the administration, and talks are ongoing about getting Larry Hoover out of jail. Would that be possible without Kanye? Does that mean that Trump can be reasoned with? It seems to point in that direction. So, and then at 1 hour and 43 minutes, Van asks, do you care if people like Kanye West? And he admits that he himself has issues with Kanye at this point. May not, I think he says something, not that he hates Kanye at this point, but is just like, it's hard not to at times. And GLC says he wants Ye to be more receptive to what GLC tells him so that Ye can move accordingly. Because he feels like he knows what Ye wants to do, but just, what's said, how it's done, doesn't quite always line up. So GLC is trying to be like, hey, man, do it this way, and then, like, this is what will happen. He talks about the MAGA hat and just being like, hey, I know what you're trying to do with the hat. Great, but that's not how people are going to see it. And then what happens, people don't see it the way that Kanye sees it, and what he was trying to do gets railroaded by the conversation and drama that the media wants to bring to the table because of the hat. He says that Ye's focused on healing. GLC wishes he'd be more in control of his emotions. And then wants people to like Ye more. Like, he does want that because Ye's his friend, and while he understands why they might get upset, he really wants that, and says that it's his goal to get everything that Ye spoke on in the past rekindled, so that what people want from Kanye and what Kanye's kind of mission is lines up, and then everything's happy. I'm sure that some of you watching that hear that and just like, why can't Kanye be Kanye? Like, is he really doing anything egregious? Is he really doing anything problematic? Like, if people have an issue with it, is that big of a problem? And I still don't... I feel like Kanye's still doing the same things that he talked about before. It's just he's looking at it from a much more macro, global perspective at this point, rather than just like, hey, the DEA isn't treating us right. Instead of just writing a song about it and having everybody be like, yeah, Kanye, he's actually going to the president and being like, hey, we need this prison reform. Like, is it that far off? It's just the perception of what he's doing is different because it's not coming through music. It's not coming through entertainment. It's coming through actions that aren't necessarily the way other people would get there, but it might be the way that Kanye thinks he has to do it to get what he wants. So I would love to hear more of GLC's thoughts on that. Maybe, GLC, hop on the podcast. We can talk, and we can explore that. So that's the podcast. That's everything that he talked about regarding Kanye. You can definitely check it out on SoundCloud, on iTunes, on YouTube, on Spotify. It's just episode 49, Good Talk with GLC. A reminder that our 30 Hours episode came out, Baby Lion to Lion King. We talk about how 30 Hours explores the past and the present, why that fits so well into the narrative of the life of Pablo, as well as kind of the postmodern meta aspects that Kanye brings into the song and why that's relevant, again, for the album as a whole and the themes and story of the album. There's a lot to learn and a lot of cool tidbits, maybe a bit too much banter. But, some people like the banter. Other people are like, stop talking and get back to Kanye. Yeah. And then three more things. One, the Yeezus Book is available. This is a book we wrote with the rap maestro Martin Connor, who did the great video for Vox, The Human Voice as an Instrument. Oh, The Instrument of the Human Voice. It was the Kanye video by Vox that so many people have watched and loved. That was Martin. He was the mind behind that. And then with The Most Unruly, Donald from The Most Unruly also contributed to the book. And then it's me and Travis writing about the lyrics. So it's the best book on Yeezus there is. I think it's the best book on any Kanye album. And we're doing work on the second book. Well, starting to. We're in talks about something big, which is cool. So definitely grab a copy of this if you love Yeezus or want to know more about it. There's art throughout it. It's kind of a coffee table book as well as like a educational. And then we also are going to be having our first Kickstarter, which is a bit strange. We've never tried to raise money before in that way. But we could use some new equipment for the podcast. Like this mic that I have right here is 3.5 years old at this point, and it's on the fritz from doing all the podcast episodes we've done, over 250, to all the videos that I've made on here, which is over 100. Like we could use better quality equipment, and to reach that next level that's not just more Yeti mics, shit's kind of expensive. So we're asking for some help. This project is going to go live in a few days, or might already be live depending on when you're watching this video. This video is going out on February 6th. So if you're still in the February period, or even early March, check it out if you want to contribute. We're trying to reach $1,600, which is just because these 3 pieces of equipment we need are so expensive, but that's what you need when you are looking for quality. And we have a few cool things that are going to go down. If you want to be on a Story episode of the podcast, we have 5 of these available, which is just a 30 to 60 minute one-on-one conversation where I ask you questions about your relationship with Kanye's music, and we get to have a full discussion about it. And that episode goes onto our podcast. You can check out some of the other Stories that we've done. We recently did one with Nino Blue, who was actually in the studio with Kanye working on Yandi the day of the Saturday Night Live performance. And we have a bunch of others back in the past with the Kanye Bars account, Brent Lewis, a journalist and photographer, Ron Parida, who, oh God, what was he doing? Kanyeisms. Yeah, the Kanyeisms Instagram page. I need to check it out. It's been a while. But you can be one of the 5 Stories that we do. We have a special episode council where you get to be one of 20 people that help us design a special episode that we record with the new equipment. And we'll be on an email thread having one-on-one discussions, feedback. You really get to participate in that. And then just a shout out on the podcast with a shout out to someone else, whether it's your like business, your social media handle, a loved one, a friend, what you want people to listen to, just any kind of shout out like that. And then just a personal thank you on the podcast. So those are the options. If you want to participate, that'd be much appreciated. But otherwise, if you want to support the YouTube channel, all you have to do is watch videos or subscribe and like or comment, as all of those things tell Twitter or tell YouTube that this is a worthwhile channel, and then they show us to more people and give us more money, which is good. Currently still around like 50 cents to $1 per video, which is great, but it would be lovely for it to be more. But very much appreciate you taking the time. I hope this was helpful, and I'll be back with another video very soon. Until then, stay wavy.